Hey y'all, I'm Erin Small, the Agriculture Extension Agent for Prince Edward County, and welcome back to the Flower Hour. If you tuned into the first episode, you know this podcast is all about building connections among flower growers, whether you're growing a few rows in your backyard, managing a full-scale cut flower farm, or maybe you're just dreaming about starting one. Flowers have a way of bringing people together, and that's exactly what I'm hoping this space can do. So in my work with Extension, I get to meet so many passionate growers who are constantly experimenting, learning, and sharing ideas, and this podcast is a way to bring those conversations to more people so that we can learn from each other and keep improving what we're doing. So whether you're listening while you're seeding trays, maybe you're harvesting buckets of blooms, or driving between markets, thank you for spending part of your day with me. So let's jump into episode number 2 of the Flower Hour. Today I'm joined by a flower farmer, mom of 5, a coffee enthusiast, and truly the heart and soul behind her farm and her family. She's a mentor, a friend, and an inspiration. So Amy Carwile of Archlynn Farms, welcome to the Flower Hour.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, so let's kick off this episode. I do this with everyone that I interview. So I want you to share with me your first flower memory. So what was that for you?
Well, there's 2 that compete. I don't suppose it really matters, but I remember being a very small child and just wandering around. We lived out in the country and seeing all the pretty little wildflowers. And I always thought that was such a special gift, and I always felt like God had given them just to me because no one else would see them because they were just out along the edge of the woods or whatever. I also have a memory of being at my dad's mom's house. I was extremely little, and she had, as a child, you think of everything as being so much bigger than what it is. So to me, it seemed like a forest of flowers, but I'm sure it wasn't actually that. But it was just, she had random plantings all over the place, and I particularly remember one lilac bush, and it was just flowering, and it smelled so wonderful, and I just always thought it just seemed like such a magical place.
Yeah, I love that. So it sounds like pretty early on.
Yes,
I've always real love for flowers. Yes. So I know, Amy, like many growers, you balance a lot. You raise a family while you also build a beautiful flower business rooted in your hard work, your creativity, your love for growing. If you follow Archlynn Farms, you've probably seen all of the care that Amy and her family pours into everything they do, from the flowers you grow to the community you've got around you. I know you're deeply passionate about mental health as well, and the role that slowing down, connecting with nature, and working with flowers can play in your well-being. So that perspective, I know, is woven into the way you approach your farm and your life in general. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you first got started in flowers and maybe what grew you into growing them in the first place?
Well, that's, like I say, I've always really loved flowers. So it was a no-brainer to want to grow flowers. I've always loved growing things as well. Until that point, though, I had largely focused on vegetable gardens. That's what I did, and I loved to take the food into the kitchen and can it, cook it, prepare it for my family. So that's where it really came from. But flowers were always just something pretty in the flower beds. You know, they were just sort of an add-on. Mm-hmm. They weren't really the product that, you worked for like you do with the vegetables. And then I just had this idea. We got our first high tunnel, I think it was either 2012 or 2013. I'm not sure exactly when it was. And for some reason, it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. What if I put flowers in here? I could grow them for longer. I could start them earlier. So that's when I really first put my toe in thinking about growing flowers as something other than yard decorations. Mm-hmm. And I put them in there. We were already going to farmers markets with our veg. So I started just bringing along a few sunflowers. I tried tulips in the high tunnel many years ago. That was a disaster because all the bulbs got eaten. Oh, no. But it was really uplifting because people were so excited about just a little bucket of zinnias or a
Yeah.
few sunflowers or, whatever it might be. And it really lifted me. And I noticed that with flowers, people responded a bit differently than they did with vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to tell me a story. Oh, I love this. I'm going to take this to my grandmother, or I'm going to take this to my mom, or I'm going to give this to my girlfriend. You got to hear this little snippet of someone's life and in some tiny way be a part of it. And I just loved that. I really loved the stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're definitely a connector. I know there was a study done where they gave people that were getting into an elevator a pen, and then they gave other people that were getting into an elevator a flower. And they had a security camera in the elevator, and they could see the level of interaction between people who received a pen and people who received a flower. And it was significantly greater with people who received a flower. I think that it's just a natural connector with people, whether or not they plan on it.
Yes, it is. It is. Because I think flowers are so, number one, they're beautiful, but it's so non-threatening and it just makes people want to talk about it. And I just saw something over the weekend. I can't give any credit because I don't remember who said it, but she was saying she had read a study and that flowers just being in the room lowered anxiety.
Yeah.
Just having them in your space.
Yeah.
And it's even more beneficial if you're actually involved in raising them. So I just think that's fabulous.
I love that.
Yeah.
So when you first started out, were there a lot of other flower growers
No.
growing at the time? Because now it's kind of surged.
Yeah.
So were you learning like on your own?
Yeah.
Did you have a mentor? What was that like for you?
No. I didn't even know of it being a thing.
Uh-huh.
Flower farming. I had actually heard that term decades before, a long time ago. And we were selling a tractor at the time, and a fellow came to purchase the tractor. It was a cultivating tractor, and he was taking it back to the Eastern Shore. And we just happened to ask him, what his crop was. And he said, I grow flowers. I'm a flower farmer.
Yeah.
And that just stuck in my 21-year-old brain and never went away.
Yeah.
I just always thought, wow, that is so fascinating to grow so many flowers. You need a tractor?
Mm-hmm.
Is that real?
Yeah.
And so then life happens, and, one thing leads to another. But at the time, I don't even think we had internet. And if we did, it was the kind where we dragged the phone line across the house and plug it in, and it would charge you by the minute with the phone, and it was terrible. So there may have been stuff out there on the internet, but I didn't know about it, if so.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of puttering around and having a lot of fun and figuring it out like that. But yeah, when COVID hit, it really... The flower farming scene really went wild.
It's taken off. It's like doubled here in Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, like you said, I think COVID, people want to connect with the land, with, sustainability and finding something creative to do during that time, kind of an outlet for a lot of people.
It is, because it's also artistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are so disconnected right now in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
As much as the digital age has brought about a lot of information and a lot of good things, I think in a way people feel distanced one from another.
Yeah.
And they instinctively know that growing something can benefit them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have flowers to sell or give or just decorate your home with, you just get that lift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think it's instinctive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when you first started, I'm sure you faced all kinds of surprises, challenges, all the things. Can you give an example of any of those things and how you overcame them?
Well, the challenges were in the early days, and it still kind of is this way too. It surprised me how hard the work was, and I know that sounds really kind of silly, but I don't know. I had this idea that, raising vegetables, raising produce, that's hard work. The flowers are fun. It just occupied a different space in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me, it's not just, I go out and work in my flower bed when I feel like it. When you start growing it with a customer in mind, it becomes work. And bugs, they hit your flowers just like they hit vegetables. And you have diseases, and you need to know your soil pH and all that kind of stuff.
So I know you mentioned growing in high tunnels to start out. So for a grower who might be interested in growing in a tunnel, I know it's an investment, and there are programs out there through NRCS and different agencies that can support the financial component, but it's still that long-term commitment of managing that space, managing your time to commit to building that space too. So how would you advise a grower who's wondering whether or not to even invest in a high tunnel?
I would ask them how far along in their flower farming journey they are. I would not recommend it for a brand new flower grower who is just thinking, oh, that would be wonderful. I'd love to have it. Let me go ahead and get it. If you're financially stable enough and it's not going to set you back if you purchase one and it doesn't amount to hill beans for you, then that's fine. But I would really suggest you get a really solid market under your base and know where you can sell those flowers. My biggest challenge with the high tunnel is yes, you can have flowers in off seasons, but you need to make sure you have a market in that off season. A lot of farmers markets are not open year round, so it's lovely if you have flowers in January or February, but if you have nowhere to sell them, then what's the point? It is expensive real estate. So I would make sure you have a place to go with them when you do have these off season flowers. It's easier to get rid of them. That doesn't sound very nice. It's easier to sell them later in the year. Around Thanksgiving, you have the holidays, that kind of thing. It works pretty well. But much after Thanksgiving, I don't have a lot of luck with selling flowers in my area. Somebody in another area, that might be a wide open market. So you just really need to assess that before you jump in because it's a big expense.
So for the grower that decides to use a high tunnel, what flower varieties would you say you prefer for a high tunnel? I know you're growing here in 7B.
Yes. What I have found works for me, and I really encourage people to practice, play around. Just because someone says, oh, that doesn't work for me, doesn't mean for you not to do it. You have permission to do all the fun things that you want to do. I mean, I have tried all kinds. I have even tried raising roses in a high tunnel because I long to just have those beautiful long-stemmed roses.
Yeah.
I've had mediocre success with it.
Yeah.
But for me, my tried and trues are larkspur. Larkspur grows so easily in a tunnel. Of course, it's not terribly difficult to grow it outside in the field either, but you can really have a crazy early larkspur crop if that's something that you're interested in. Orlea does beautifully in a high tunnel. Feverfew is amazing. When you see feverfew from the field versus in a high tunnel, it's crazy how it just loves that atmosphere because these are plants that like it a little cold. And so as long as they're not having a hard frost on them, they're happy, they're growing. So they do really, really well. Another one that I really almost won't grow outside, I have grown it outside, is Lysianthus. Lysianthus is just an amazing plant in a tunnel. And even though they can handle the heat, they grow such longer stems for me in a high tunnel than they do in the field. Not to mention Lysianthus, if you've ever grown them, you know that they're an emotional investment to get those.
They take forever.
Once you get them on the ground, they're not such prima donnas. But, just having the rain beat dirt on them or something, I just can't stand that. So, to me, Lysianthus always go in a tunnel. And I did have great luck, not that first year, but in later years, I've had great luck raising tulips in the tunnel. And I always do my ranunculus in the tunnel.
Snapdragons, too. Is that one that you try in the tunnel?
I raise snapdragons in the tunnel just about every year because they're so dependable. I can plant them. Usually, I put them out in the tunnel around Thanksgiving or a little bit later, depending on how cold it is. They're not as cold tolerant as, say, the larkspur, but they're pretty darn close. And I always do put those in there to get an early crop of snaps. But I usually have those coming in the tunnel, and then I also have some in the field.
Yeah, and so growing in that tunnel extends your growing season because each layer of plastic
Hmm.
changes your grow zone.
Yes.
Um, so beyond that, what kind of I guess growing systems are different in a high tunnel for those listening?
Um, well, you do have to still watch the cold on some things because even though they're not going to have get a frost on them, where you go out and you see that on them and they've just turned black, there are some things that actually don't like below a certain temperature in the cold. And that was a mistake I made early on. I felt like, oh, it's in a high tone, it's safe. And for the most part, it is. But here in Virginia, occasionally you'll get those crazy, like 11-degree nights.
Yeah.
That's still really cold, even if it's in a high tunnel.
Yeah.
So even though your little babies aren't going to get frost on them, they are really going to be doing some shivering. So at that point, I do take in row covers and cover them, and sometimes even a double layer of row
Oh,
covers,
wow.
depending on how cold it's going to be. I have found they're more cold tolerant the smaller they are once they've rooted in. Now, not just a plant you just put there. They're just pitiful right out of the baby crib. So you don't want to do that. But once they've rooted and they haven't flowered yet, they seem to tolerate it better. I've noticed when like my snapdragons are in flower and then we get a crazy cold night, the plant might live, but that flower bloom, it's not worth selling anymore. They just don't seem to hold up to it.
Mm.
And if you put the row cover on it when they're tall and in flower, they're bending and they're all warm.
Yeah.
So that's a trick.
Yeah. Now how about I know like this coming week it's going to be in the 90s
Yeah.
here in Virginia. Um, how do you tackle that when you have things in a high tunnel already?
That's a hard one. I actually have a harder struggle with the heat
Yeah.
because the things that are in the tunnel are in there because they don't like crazy hot. They
Uh-huh.
like it cool, which is
Mhm.
why they went in there back around Thanksgiving or December,
Yeah.
whenever it was I happen to get around and get to it. So I just crank open the sides and open the door, and that's really all you can do. And for instance, I have some stock right now. I know it's crazy late to be planting stock, but there was a problem with my seed supplier, and the seed's delayed. It was a whole fiasco. It was kind of frustrating. But anyway, so I have some of that, and I've always put that in the high tunnel pretty early, and it's another one I should have included in that list. It really loves the high tunnel.
Love it.
Does beautifully too, and you can plant them so close you can pack a row full with those stock. But anyway, I was seeing what you're seeing about the temperatures. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to go in the field because it'll actually be cooler outside than in that tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so heat is hard to
It's
deal with in the
crazy.
tunnel, and that's why, like in July, it's pretty much empty
Mm-hmm.
unless I've got some Lizzie still hanging out.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know with a high tunnel, um, they can be pretty user friendly. For women, it's
Mhm.
kind of something that I feel like is a manageable space. It's pretty user friendly, I would
Mhm.
say.
It is.
Can you talk a little bit on that?
Because it's a small area, not to say women can't handle a huge area, but to me, just having boundaries helps.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very manageable. Like if a walk behind tiller, you don't mess. I know I drive tractors. A lot of women drive tractors, but some people are intimidated by them and they don't, or they just don't want to have to purchase one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very friendly towards having, a walk behind tiller. If you really are gung ho, you can
Yeah.
go the whole thing with hand tools once you're have your initial breakup of the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it keeps things in a manageable proportion too. So whatever you're fertilizing or if you're, hand picking off bugs or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you can focus on really high value crops in that small space and really just focus on them so intently that you have top notch flowers in there because the great thing that flowers offer in a high tunnel is they don't get beaten down by the rain.
Mm-hmm. A
And
little more protection in
yeah,
there.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
protected from the elements.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned, the mental health component again. And, there's actually a study that shows that soil actually acts as a natural antidepressant and stress reliever through beneficial bacteria, which are specifically in soil. and that bacteria stimulates serotonin production in your brain, which actually does reduce anxiety, improves cognitive function. It can actually help your gut brain connection, help your digestive health. There's so much to working in the soil that's actually data proven. So like you said, wintertime can be a lonely time and a hard time, especially for people like us who our hobbies are summer loving, you know?
Yeah.
So I think for that component too, having a high tunnel could be really beneficial.
I absolutely agree.
So I mentioned that NRCS has some programs to assist and support those of you who are interested in a high tunnel. You can also reach out to your local extension agent, and maybe you can plug into the cut flower discussion group that I run here through Extension to gain more knowledge in growing in high tunnels. So Amy, speaking of Extension, what has your partnership with Extension looked like throughout the years? I'm sure that it's changed throughout the years as your county agents have changed, but are there some overlying things that you've always noticed or worked with them?
We have always had a close relationship with Extension. They are such a valuable resource to have. You can pick up the phone. I can call you. I can call our Charlotte County Extension agent. You can even call Extension agents at VSU or Tech and get all kinds of information, not to mention all the things that are on the internet that you can access, all the different pages and pages of research that have been done. So that's really, really helpful. My kids, when I was a younger person and my kids were little, they all did 4-H, and that was a huge part of our lives. I mean, a huge part of our lives. Extension out anytime we have some sort of an issue, we have a soil-borne disease we don't know how to get rid of. We need some help with pest management, anything like that. Not to mention all the bookwork that goes into having to run farms. So our extension agent has even offered classes on how to set up your own web page, to sell your products. Just fabulous, fabulous resources, and almost all of them are free. Or very inexpensive. So there's good information out there, and I highly encourage anybody to use Extension.
Yes, and beyond those things you mentioned, we also do well water sampling. A lot of that's going on this time of year. Have you utilized that?
Oh yes, we do that. We do that multiple times every year.
Yeah. Now that we've talked a little bit about Extension and how you've utilized our services, let's dive into a little bit of your home life, balancing that with your farm. So not only are you growing flowers, you also do some agritourism with vegetables, strawberries, pumpkins. You've got a lot going on. I know you've got grandkids as well, and your own children, and also an 11-year-old daughter. So could you dive into your story a little bit, how that began?
Well, I have always enjoyed growing things, like I mentioned earlier. So I always had a little garden, and my kids would come help me in my little garden. And we even played around with a farmer's market that they used to have in Phoenix a long time ago. And so that was a whole lot of fun, and we really enjoyed doing that kind of thing. And as the children grew, the model grew, and then we had kids, particularly one son in particular, who wanted to stay on the farm. So then it had to be enough to support him and his future family. So we just, the Lord just kept providing, and we were able to just continue to keep growing. And so that was really awesome. And I dived a little bit deeper into flowers. After my little daughter was born, I was blessed with a late life baby. And I like to say I took like a 2-year maternity leave. At that point, when I sort of resurfaced and felt like I wanted to get back in the field, everything was humming along beautifully, and I wanted my own space where I could come and go and be a little more hands-on, I think. The produce had gotten more mechanized and had just gotten bigger than I wanted to deal with day in and day out. So that's when I came back to flowers and just, thought, well, I'm going to up my game here. And instead of just sending a bucket or two at a time, I'm going to do something here.
Yeah.
And by this time, there was all kinds of information on the internet. It was just before the explosion of flower farmers that hit in, I guess, 2019, 2020. It was just before all of that. And yeah, it was just so much fun, and it gave me a chance to get outside
Yeah.
and to do these things and to feel like I was contributing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know your daughter is kind of your shadow. She
Yeah.
she does a lot with you. I know you homeschool, and so that's probably helped with the ease of your schedule as well,
Yes.
farming and giving her exposure to things that she otherwise might not have gotten exposure to. Before we wrap it up today, Amy, is there anything else that you'd like to share about Archlynn Farms or any upcoming events, workshops, things you've got going on?
Well, the biggest thing we have going on in the short term is, Lord willing, our strawberries are coming on. I think I heard that my son went out and picked a few, and
Awesome.
it's always the high water mark of the year.
That's
So
great.
we're hoping in a couple of weeks. Stay tuned to Facebook, Archlynn Farm on Facebook, and my daughter-in-law will let everybody know when the patch opens. So hopefully that will be. We're hoping in a couple of weeks.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
So that would be great. And then we're going to still do our You Pick Flowers. So we look forward to that. That usually hits in July, and depending on when we get out there and actually get them in the ground. So again, watch Facebook for that, and we'll have the dates and times for that. And I'm hoping very much, and this isn't a done deal, but I'm really hoping to have a painting evening in the flowers. Anytime you're around flowers, it's got to be good. Right?
That sounds great. Yes. And our next discussion group meeting will actually be at your farm in May. So we'll be looking forward to that too. I collaborate with Amy a lot with extension and programs and all the things. So it sounds like Facebook would be the best way to find Archlynn Farm flowers if we're interested.
Yeah. We have Archlynn Farm, and then there's Archlynn Farm Flowers.
Okay.
So anyway, if you get to one, you'll easily see the other.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming and meeting with me today, Amy. It's just been a pleasure to talk to you. And, I've been excited to have you on this podcast because working with you has meant so much to me. And as I mentioned in my last episode, I think having a mentor in any avenue of your life is very important. And Amy has been that for me in the flower world. So we're just so happy to have you. So, we hope that you all have enjoyed tuning into this episode, and we'll stay tuned for the next one to come.